Hi everyone, my name is Naina and this is my midterm presentation for CIS 3367. I will be going over my topic and get into explaining how I did the Excel project. So in this project, I will be focusing on the impacts of COVID-19 on our global economy. The pandemic has disrupted lives across all countries and communities and negatively affected global economic growth in 2020 beyond anything we have experienced in nearly a century. It is estimated that the virus has reduced global economic growth in 2020 to an annualized rate of around -3.2%, with the recovery projected of 5.9% in 2021. In most countries, economic growth fell apart sharply in the second quarter of 2020 and rebounded quickly in the third quarter and has been positive since then. So over here we have three data sets to help me with the project. Firstly, we have the global GDP. Second, we have the global unemployment rate. And lastly, we have the impact of COVID-19 on fiscal and monetary variables. I will go into more detail for each data sets later, but first we will start with global GDP. So what is GDP? GDP is gross domestic product, which is the total monetary or market value of all finished goods and services produced within a country's borders in a specific time period. In simple terms, GDP provides an economic snapshot of a country, and it is used to estimate the size of the economy and growth rate. So in this case, we look at the effect of COVID-19 in GDP at every area of the globe. This Excel project allows us to pinpoint which area was most affected by comparing the results from year 2019 and 2020. So as you can see here in this data set, we have years from 2019 till 2025, but 2022 till 2025 is mostly inferred or predicted data. But we will be mostly looking at 2019 and 2020 for our data set and compare them both to see the difference between the years and how GDP has decreased over the pandemic. And to do that, we will be doing a pivot table. So to do a pivot table, you can click any cell in the data set, and with that, you go to the Insert tab in the Tables group and click Pivot Table. And by clicking the pivot table, you get all these options, but you can just click on the pivot table and you see a box pop up, and you want to make sure it is in a new worksheet, and you see how all these data sets have already been selected. And with that, you click OK and you get into a new worksheet. And with the new worksheet here, you could see all the data sets that have been reduced into what you want it to be. So over here in the field list area, there are fields that you could drag into all these areas over here to help you with forming a graph or a data set for your data. So as you can see here, I have selected countries, which are all the areas around the globe, and 2019 and 2020 as my data set. So as you can see here in this graph, that 2020, the GDP has fallen under 0%. Also in 2019, it was pretty much above the 0%. And now this data is now then copied and pasted into our dashboard, which I will show you later. And secondly, let's move on to the unemployment rate of around the globe. So over here, we have the unemployment rate, which shows all the countries around the globe and all the years that we hear. So from 2019 till 2025. As I mentioned before, 2022 to 2025 was an inferring or prediction with the website that I was given. So we will be mostly closely looking at 2019 and 2020. So the unemployment rate in each country that was caused by the pandemic it was very greatly affected in almost every area. So each country has a different range of unemployment rate. Unemployment rate is one of the most known factors that came out of the pandemic. Each and every country suffered, and with that I have also included a data that showed the case that the impact of COVID-19 on fiscal and monetary variables. So before getting into the fiscal and monetary data set, I will be showing you how I got the second pivot table from this data set. So over here you can see that I use the same thing I use for the GDP over here. So for the pivot table, you select any data sets over here, insert pivot table, and you can select the data already gets selected, and you click OK. Make sure it's new worksheet again, and then over here the pivot table is produced. And over here you can see all the countries that are listed. Of course, you want to produce all these data and see how each year has been affected by the percent of unemployment rate. And as you can see here, the field list is open, and I have, you could click on any of this to see which data you want to add. So let's just say for 2019 and 2020, you can see how the rate has changed in each country. And a little data over here shows us all the countries and its rate during in 2019 and 2020. So going back to the unemployment rate, I also have a map here which was produced in this page, which is through the map field over here in the charts table, in the table here. And with that, you just click on the maps table and you select the map containing all these data here, showing us where in the world is the rate being affected. And this is also produced and copied and pasted into our dashboard. And lastly, we have our impact of COVID-19 on fiscal and monetary variables, which shows us the impact of low, middle, and high income countries that battle with the pandemic. And it also shows us the inflation rate in each category and the revenue expenditure of GDP as well. So with this, the same thing, I used the pivot table to create a visualization. Same thing what I did with the other two data sets, and then the pivot table was produced. And over here you can see some from the low income countries and the middle income countries and the high income countries, and you can see all this data set over here. And this was also copied and pasted into our dashboard over here. And with this data, we can see that with all the COVID impacted all regions of the world, the wealthier countries responded with more testing and quicker vaccination rates, and a great growth in GDP within the middle income countries. So with this data, you could see how wealthier countries were able to produce medical help in a sense. Now on our dashboard, we have our three sets of data here. We have our GDP, we have over here we have our unemployment rate around the world, and you can click on the slicer, which allows you to see each country's rate of unemployment rate. But any country you want, as you can see here, and this is called a slicer. And for that, you can go back to your pivot table of the data you want. You click on the data, and you see and go to insert, and in the filter section you see slicer over here, and click on that, and in there you can see all the options that are available for you, and you click on anything and you click on that, click OK over here, and you get your slicer, and that will allow you to change the data and see all the other different countries. So with all these data sets, I have created a dashboard that allows us to see how the globe has challenged through the pandemic with the graph bars and map to show us the data more closely and clearly and understand how the economy was impacted by COVID-19. Thank you for listening.